I didn't say what I was going to talk about, but I do want to talk about what I do because often in family get-togethers when I meet people who don't know me and they ask, "What do you do?" And it's a good question. What do I do? What's my job? So I try to give it a name because it's not quite hasbara, public relations, because that's sometimes considered propaganda, and that's not a word that I want to use. And that's also not exactly what I want to do because it could be talking about the nightlife in Tel Aviv or Israel being a startup nation. It's kind of apologetic. If I have to explain something, it's almost as if I'm apologizing for it. And in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there's public diplomacy. And that's also not what I do because I'm not especially diplomatic. And also, public diplomacy talks a lot about social media. This is the first thing that popped up on Instagram last night. So, no, we are involved in social media, but we do it from a different perspective. We don't speak that language. We don't speak the social media language. So, it's not quite that either. I don't know how to explain 3,000 years of history in a 15-second video. It's impossible. Alma Center is based on research, but it's not just research. It's not a think tank. We call ourselves a research and education center. We do educational activity, very extensive educational activity, as David spoke about. But education can sometimes sounds a little bit patronizing, but I think it's a very accurate term to describe what we actually do. So what do? I do what I know how to do best. What I did most of my professional life, I do intelligence. But unlike intelligence officers, we also talk. We talk a lot about intelligence. And that's how I got to how I chose the name of our next panel, the panel after lunch, which is what I called intelligence based diplomacy. Israel is fighting in Gaza, Judea and Samaria, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Iran. That's 7 fronts, but there's another front, the information war that we're fighting, which is no less important. We produce information and knowledge in many different ways through research, and we're constantly talking about it, whenever possible, face to face. As one of my greatest fears is that AI will bring George Orwell's 1984 back to life, but in its 2084 form, in which will erase 3,000 years of Jewish history in the land of Israel. I feel that my job is to make sure that international policymakers have enough information about the present. I live in northern Israel, and I've spent most of my career in the northern front during 2 wars, once as an IDF officer and once as a local resident. I think it's only natural that I would establish a center that provides intelligence about northern Israel to the international community. Intelligence-based diplomacy. So why diplomacy? Because I truly believe that certainly can be achieved through transparency, reliability, and lots of visuals. It means making cautious assessments, but with lots of detail. Lots of detail, like Intel's slide. It's very important. We look beyond the border. These are photos that we took of the border area, working bottom up and not top down. Our research method focuses on what the situation in the field looks like, how it corresponds with what the leaders are saying. In military language, we look at the connection between the tactic, the operational, and the strategic. Our sources are all OSINT, open sources. Most of the material is in Arabic, some in English, some Farsi, some Hebrew, mostly Arabic. Social media, the press, and lots of cross-referencing with what we see in the field. What does Hezbollah's village look like? Looking at an operative who is assassinated in uniform, what does he look like? This is a missile site in Iran. What does it look like before it's destroyed? What does it look like? What does it actually look like in the field? And what is the other side saying to the other side? Not necessarily what the other side is saying to the international community or to us. And of course, during the war, we created a database of statistics that present a reliable picture of what's actually going on. How many Hezbollah attacks were there? What weapons were used? That's the complicated graph on the right. Were there casualties? Which towns were evacuated? Here's an example of weapons, thanks to Hezbollah, by the way. Maps of the evacuated towns, attacks in Lebanon. All of this information can give us information on who the terrorists are, where they're located, what threats they pose, and who should be taking action against them but are not. These are our work tools. And why do I use the word diplomacy? Because, as I said, part of our goal is to educate. We want to present information that will be presented to decision makers and to policy makers. Sometimes people say, I have a stupid question, but there's no such thing as a stupid question, and no one's at fault for not having the information. My job is to answer every question based on the information I have, realizing the limitations, because we have access only to open source information. Some do, but they cannot, but the people who have access to intelligence cannot do diplomacy. Intelligence-based diplomacy, and as is our mission statement, is to give Israel legitimacy. And I want to explain what that means. My experience from the war in 2006, as I said, I was an officer in the IDF, is that no one actually understands us. President Bush called Prime Minister Alma and said, it's over. There's a UN decision, remember? 1701. And the war. Now, it was clear to everyone that the UN decision would not change the reality. It did change the reality in the end, but for the worse. The destruction of Lebanon in the past year is the result of how the war ended in 2006. For 18 years, I fought to give Israel legitimacy for military action in Lebanon that I knew one day would come, to give Israel legitimacy to reach an agreement that would be better than the previous one, 1701. I didn't realize how bad it would be. Anyone who visited the towns that were abandoned for a year and a half, seeing the Sukkot standing from the previous holiday, and this photo was taken just 3 months ago, seeing fruit bearing trees that were never picked, bikes burnt by Hezbollah missiles, Metula, where there's not a single street without a house that went up in flames. We saw with our own eyes how terrible this war is. Now it looks like everything's over. We can close the Alma Center, retire. Israel has changed the face of the Middle East, but the previous two panels proved how wrong that is. Our goal right now is more complex than it was before. Israeli policy is more proactive, with more presence on the other side as well, in Lebanon and in Syria. Why would anyone in the world think this is legitimate? And what's more, considering everything going on domestically inside Israel, is what the Israeli government doing right? Can I explain that it's the right thing to do? Is it policy in the north the best and most humane and safe thing to do for both sides? Is Israel taking advantages of opportunities for normalization or ignoring those opportunities? I don't agree with everything my government does, but it's not my job. I don't represent the government. My job is to provide information about the situation so that those who listen to me will at least understand the full range of considerations, especially the security considerations made by my government. Maybe the decision makers from foreign countries, and we have several representatives here, they might have adopted different policies. But after a briefing from the Alma Center, they at least understand what lies behind the decisions made by the government, which often has to choose between one bad alternative and a worse one. At the end of the day, I think that if we try to connect everything that's called intelligence-based diplomacy to our mission statement, then my mission is to prevent a situation in which criticism of the State of Israel results in the denial of its right to exist. There are many ways to do this. The next panel will feature two of my mentors. Nathan is one of them, but in the next panel you'll hear from two other mentors. One is Mary Eisen, and the other is Avital. Avital was the first person to give me the idea to brief groups who visit the border, even out of uniform. Mary taught me to constantly learn and to stay up to date and not be afraid of the world of generals. Miriam Avital will talk about how intelligence-based diplomacy can help prevent the next massacre. I'm personally curious to hear the answer. During the lunch break, I want to invite you to get a taste of our of Colin's incredible project, which visualizes the threat. You saw a bit of this beforehand, and outside, Colin will explain how he does this, how he drives the Iranians crazy, drives this Hezbollah crazy. They think we're a huge organization with eyes on the ground in these places, but he gets all of this information from open sources, from OSINT. When I saw this slide, I couldn't believe the scale of the content. Dozens of videos, information from websites, videos from Lebanon, from Syria, two from Yemen, and all of the details about how this is done. Talk to Colin. He's waiting for you outside. Here's one of his videos. Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch.